I, 30, female, have been married to Marcus, fake name, 32, male, for 3 years. We met in high school and reconnected several years later. Once we started dating, there was no looking back, and here we are, married for 3 years and still going strong. Not everyone was happy about our wedding, though, especially my older sister, Nina, 32. We went to the same high school, and Nina had a major crush on my husband back then, but the feelings weren't mutual as far as I know. In fact, he didn't even know that Nina had a thing for him, which he told me several months into our relationship. Anyway, Nina didn't attend our wedding, and neither has she spoken to me ever since I announced my engagement, which was fine by me. She's never liked me. I don't know why. It's not your typical sibling rivalry where I'm the golden child and she's sidelined by me all the time because our parents always treated us equally. And it wasn't even as though I was better than her academically or in sports. Heck, we don't even look different, so I literally never understood why she disliked me so much. I tried to be her friend growing up, but that would always end up getting pushed away, so I just stopped and made my peace with the fact that my older sister just didn't like me, and that was that. We weren't close, so her not attending my wedding didn't make much of a difference to me at all. We only meet on holidays or at family events, but even then she doesn't acknowledge me, and neither do I talk to her, because it's pretty pointless to try and befriend a person who hates you for no reason. Our relatives are also well aware of our strained relationship, so there aren't many who question it either. It's just established that we don't cross each other's ways at all. But around half a year ago, she did cross me, and it was just so pathetic. 6 months back, my husband received a drunken phone call from Nina where she went on to speak at length about how he'd married the wrong sister and that she would be a much better wife for him than I was. She didn't know that she was on a speaker and I was sitting right beside him giggling through her rant. She eventually ended it by announcing that she was going to marry him one way or the other, and she'd even be willing to be his mistress if it came down to it. I was really surprised by that because it was so low. I'm going to be honest, I did think it was funny and pathetic, but I was also angry that she'd even dared to pull something like this, even though I hadn't even done anything to her. So I decided that I'd had enough, and if she was allowed to mess with me, then so was I. I encouraged my husband to flirt with her and give her false hopes. It was cruel, but it was also much needed and well deserved. He told her to come over to our house so they could get married now, and she agreed readily, sounding like she'd won the lottery. Marcus and I set up a hidden camera in our living room the next day, and I personally decorated our room to look as dreamy as possible. Fit for a wedding. Then I sat in the next room when she arrived and watched the drama unfold. It was way too funny to watch her try and flirt with my husband while he just tried to be as stiff as possible, and after a quick exchange of vows and rings, he told her to go away and keep this a secret until he told her that it was safe to tell people. He didn't even kiss her after the vows, and even then, the idiot didn't seem to think that something was off. After the mock ceremony, Marcus and I ended up laughing at the video for around half an hour because of how delusional this woman seemed. It was just sad that she was ready to go so low just because she hated me and wanted my husband. Sucks for her that my husband doesn't love anyone other than me. We'd thought we'd send the video to my parents, but decided that we'd wait for the right time. She would definitely try to pull some crap on us again, and that's when we'd send this to them so that they realize what a trashy person she really is, who was willing to hit on someone else's husband just to get back at her sister. My parents treated us equally, but they were also way too supportive of my sister, even though she didn't deserve it. For instance, they paid for my sister's vacation to Spain a few months before I was supposed to get married, because apparently she was very affected by this wedding and wanted some time away. I hated that they were falling for her victim act, but they were also paying for my wedding venue, so I couldn't complain that they were being unfair. They really weren't. And then again, they let my sister stay with them when I was on my honeymoon because she was feeling lonely. I hated that she would try to use my marriage to her high school crush as a way to gain sympathy from our parents, and they would fall for it again and again. I needed them to know that she was a terrible person and that they didn't have to sympathize with her anymore. So for that, if I had to do something sly and backhanded, then I was ready to do that as well. I just didn't want my parents falling for my sister's act anymore. We had to wait for the right time to send it to my parents, though, because I knew that if I told them we'd pulled this off just because of a drunk phone call, they'd tell me that I was being just as bad as her and it would lead nowhere. So I had to wait for her to mess up somehow. A few days back, my sister finally publicly announced that she's been married to Marcus for half a year now, and even though they've been keeping it under wraps up until now, she's finally ready to own up to it. She also added that she was giving me one day to vacate the house and hand over all my jewelry, since now, as Marcus's wife, she owned everything that once used to be mine. Marcus and I were at home that day, and our inbox was instantly flooded with messages while our phones rang off the hook with noisy relatives asking about what was going on. After their fake wedding, Nina would often text Marcus and tell him that she loved him and would constantly ask about when exactly they'd announce their love to the world. Marcus would probably reply once a month and would always tell her that they'd do it when the time was right. The last time she texted was 3 weeks ago, and I guess she just couldn't wait anymore. I was surprised that she'd actually gone ahead and done something so crazy, but well, I knew this was bound to happen someday. She was always going to snap and do something insanely stupid and ridiculous, and this was it. Marcus decided to call her up and even recorded the call so that I'd have more proof to show to my parents. Even on the phone call, she was pretty confident in spite of the fact that Marcus had immediately handed over his phone to me. For whatever reason, she genuinely believed that she and Marcus were still actually married. She told me that begging her or pleading with her wasn't going to change the reality, so I could just save my breath and instead use my energy to think about what I would do now that I didn't have anything. It was so ridiculous that I actually ended up laughing in her face before I told her the truth about what had happened 6 months ago. Of course, she refused to believe me and told me to put her on the phone with her husband, so I handed Marcus his phone, and after that, he had to convince Nina for like 10 minutes before she actually realized that she'd been played for a fool. I don't know why exactly she'd even fallen for any of this, since there was no priest officiating the wedding, no paperwork, and even her own so-called husband wasn't willing to speak to her more than once a month. I think anyone with even half a brain cell would have realized that this was all fake and she'd been screwed over if there were so many hints, but she's too delusional. Once she did realize, though, she totally snapped and started screaming at us about how we just ruined her reputation and life, and that we were downright evil and immoral for doing this to her. She was even sobbing about how I'd destroyed her life, but I really think that it was she who did this to herself. She wanted my husband and my life so badly that she was willing to do anything for it. I really don't understand how that's my fault. Even after that, when I sent my parents the wedding video and explained to them everything that had happened, since they'd been getting a lot of calls regarding Nina's post, and since they weren't too active on social media, they had no idea what was going on. So Marcus and I explained everything and came clean to them, hoping that they'd see that Nina was a terrible person and she was willing to wreck my home just so she could be with Marcus and steal my life from me. But the only thing that my parents cared about was the fact that I'd been a cruel person and my husband and I had played a nasty prank on Nina for absolutely no reason. They told me that they were truly embarrassed by the antics that their fully grown daughters were up to, and even threatened to cut us both out of their will if we didn't grow the hell up and issue a public apology to each other. I got into an argument with my parents over this because They just couldn't make me apologize to the woman who was trying to steal my husband from me. It was just not fair, and yes, maybe I'd been a bit too cruel and had taken things too far, but that didn't just magically make Nina's actions right. My parents had just stuck on the fact that what we did to Nina was messed up on a psychological level, and instead of creating so much drama, we could have just blocked her after that phone call and made sure that we told them that day itself instead of waiting so long just so that Nina would inevitably end up creating a public spectacle of our family. They think that both of us are too self-involved and believe that we need to introspect a little. My mother told me that Nina might be a jealous homewrecker, but I'm no less, since what I'd done was actually psychotic and she couldn't believe that she'd raised two daughters who hated each other so much that they were willing to stoop to any level just for revenge, even at our age. I'll admit that it really did sting a lot. It's been 2 whole days and I still can't bring myself to forget that comment, even though my husband thinks that my parents were way too harsh on us. I don't know what to think right now. AITA for making a fool out of my sister for 6 months by making her believe that my husband actually loved her back. Update 1. Hi guys, I know I messed up. I do realize that now, so everyone can ease up on the hatred. I'm a human being and I made a huge mistake. I get that now. What I did was cruel and unnecessary just to force my parents to cut my sister off. I didn't realize it back when I was writing that post, but I guess I'd grown to hate her just as much as she hated me and didn't even realize it. Nothing justifies what I did since it caused someone an unbearable amount of shame and trauma. A few days after the whole fiasco, my parents got in touch with me and told me a lot of things that I didn't know about my sister, and I just didn't know what to say anymore. I'm ashamed of myself right now, and I wish I could go back in time to fix things. We should have just blocked her number that day and let it go. Nina is actually in rehab right now because while I wasn't aware of it, she had a crippling alcohol addiction and was struggling with that all along. I don't blame myself for the addiction, of course, but I do think that she relapsed because of what I'd done. 6 months ago, she'd relapsed once, but my parents had managed to keep an eye on her for the next few months so that she wouldn't give in once more. But then, after Marcus and I told her the truth, she relapsed yet again. Even all the supposed vacations that my parents were sponsoring for her, that I'd misunderstood, were actually trips to rehab. But since my parents needed an explanation for her absence at certain events and holidays, they'd use vacations to cover it up. Nina and I had pretty much stopped speaking after she moved out for college, so I had no way to find out what she was going through. My parents told me that they do think they messed up by not telling me the real reason she'd be absent for so long and didn't realize that their lies about where she was would backfire in such a way. They hadn't even considered the possibility that maybe even I'd feel jealous and try to get back at her, which is why this whole situation came to be in the first place. I really just don't understand what to do right now and feel so awfully guilty. Nina had behavioral problems all along growing up, but I'd never known that because my parents had never told me about any of it. They'd done their best to treat us like equals, and I think they did their job well too. But this was just a consequence of keeping us separate that they hadn't considered. And neither had we, to be very honest. Both of us had lost any compassion we had for each other and had forgotten that this person we hated so much was also a human being. I really do regret whatever happened, and I'm planning on paying her a visit as soon as I can so that I can at least apologize for whatever happened. There are still a lot of our relatives and extended family who are trying to gossip about what has happened, and while under usual circumstances I would have grabbed this opportunity to talk crap about Nina, I'm obviously ignoring all those people now and only praying that nothing too serious happens to her, since my parents told me that they'd found her passed out in her house, which was a first. All the other times that she's relapsed, she's been able to approach them and ask for help, still conscious. When my parents didn't hear from her for 2 days after that post, they decided to go visit her, and that's when they realized that she'd relapsed yet again. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for my parents to realize that my sister and I had fallen apart so badly that there was no hope of reconciliation. I'm just so sorry about whatever has happened. I don't know why I'm saying it here either, but I feel like I have to put it out there in the universe so that somehow Nina can feel it. I'm truly sorry. Update 2. I finally visited Nina today. She was in really bad shape and it showed on her face. She's been in rehab for a few weeks now. She's slowly recovering, but she wasn't in any state to meet people, least of all me, these days. She'd finally agreed to see me, and it was really weird and horrible for me to see her because she looked bad. Not ugly, but bad in a way that makes you feel like this person has been through something. It was very awkward for me to walk into that room and speak to her initially, since we'd barely ever treated each other like family once we reached adulthood. But now we had to put all that behind us, or at least try, so that we don't keep trying to one-up each other and drive one another crazy in the process. So I apologized to her for whatever I'd done and admitted that it was just insane. I'd hated her so much that I'd literally pulled some soap opera level stunt just to put her down and gaslight her, which was pretty psychotic of me. She agreed and then apologized to me for trying to get with Marcus as well. She told me that she'd always been jealous of me right from when we were kids, because once I was born she felt like I would become her competition. It was all internalized, but it still manifested in her behavior. She just couldn't control it, so she felt the need to put me down and compete with me so that she could win. When Marcus agreed to marry her, she finally thought that she'd won, but that wasn't the case. She said that she was finally done competing, and even though this didn't mean that we were friends all of a sudden, but it was certainly a fresh start to say the least. So that's what happened, and I truly am grateful that I got a second chance. I would have hated myself forever if something awful had happened to Nina, and would have forever blamed myself. I feel considerably better now. Update 3. Hi, I just wanted to tell you guys that Marcus and I are still together, obviously. That goes without saying. I don't know who suggested that Marcus and I had split just because I hadn't mentioned him in my updates. He knows and is well aware of everything that's happened to Nina, and he also apologized to her. She didn't want to meet him, but she did say that she was over it now and realizes that Marcus was just trying to be a loyal and protective husband, and she isn't going to hold that against him, so that was that. He obviously felt really guilty about everything as well and was just as sorry as I was, if not more. I have no idea why people were bashing him for being complicit and not doing anything to fix things, even though I hadn't even mentioned whether he had apologized or not. So I hope this clears that up and people stop calling us horrible names. We've apologized and Nina forgives us. End of story. And for the people who are blaming my parents and saying that they're responsible for this situation, I don't know why you think that's the case. My parents could have dealt with this better for sure, but I think they were trying their best to handle everything with sensitivity and kindness. Them hiding my sister's alcoholism from me was probably in both our best interests. I hated her and she hated me, so why would it even matter what the other was going through? Obviously, they didn't know what was going to happen in the future, so I'm not going to blame them for hiding this piece of information from me. They did what they felt was right, and honestly, I think it's fine. There's a lot of you guys who still think that my sister is the villain somehow, and okay, maybe she is, but so was I. What I did was really messed up. So if I get a second chance to fix our relationship and have a normal family for once, then I'll take that without question. Even if it means forgiving my sister. Thank you. Update 4. Hi everyone, it's been one whole year since I posted last, and wow, this feels weird, but I think I'm ready to share what's happened since then. A lot of you warned me that my sister would backstab me again or something. A lot of you said that I need to cut my parents out of my life, and a lot of you thought that I was the only toxic element here, and that they'd all be better off without me. I'm thankful that none of those things are true and we're all happy with our respective lives right now. My sister and I made a genuine effort after that to reconnect and build a relationship with each other because both of us were pretty tired of fighting with one another. It just wasn't worth it anymore, especially in our 30s when we had 100 things to worry about anyway. We just didn't want to spend more of our precious time and energy on something as petty as our rivalry anymore. So we would meet for coffee every once in a while, not too often, but at least once in 3 months. We were also actually nice to each other at one of our cousins' weddings, and that was quite the shock for the rest of our family. Nina and I aren't the best of friends at all, but we're trying to be friends. We're okay with each other now, and that's what matters. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we're very close, but we're not going to actively try and hurt each other now, that's for sure. She's also moving a little further away from home for a better job, and while that does sort of seem risky given her predicament with regards to alcohol, my parents are going to handle that, and if they ever need any help, Marcus and I will always be there for her. It finally feels like I have a somewhat normal family, and I'm really, really happy about it. I never thought that Nina and I would ever have any relationship at all, let alone a good one, but who knows? Maybe even that's going to happen someday, so I'm glad that I didn't give up hope. And speaking of family, there's soon going to be an addition to mine. Marcus and I discovered that we were pregnant just a few weeks ago, and everyone is thrilled. I'm a month in already, and we announced it to our close friends and family on FaceTime a few days back. I FaceTimed my parents and sister in a group, and when I told them the news, they seemed really thrilled. Yeah, Nina seemed genuinely happy when I told her and even sent me a bouquet of yellow roses to congratulate me the next day. So life's been pretty great, and I guess that's how it is when you're not constantly filled with hatred and anger. I'm looking forward to pregnancy and motherhood, and I hope for the best. Stay tuned for more stories from our